Hello, hello, hello.
Good evening, sir.
Hello, John. Hello, Regina.
Hello.
Hey, get out of there. Co-host.
Hi,
John,
John.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Thanks for doing this tonight.
John, you're a co-host. Can you try sharing your screen? Make sure everything's working here.
Yep. Yep.
Your audio's solid.
Okay.
As they say, 5 by 5.
How's that?
Yep, we're good. Regina,
Okay.
you want to do the same thing with your intro slides?
Yep. Right now.
Hey everyone.
Hey, Jen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chris, you want me to have my camera on?
Completely up to you, John.
I didn't.
Speaker's choice.
We'll give it a try. If it gets distracting, I'll turn it off.
John, when it comes to people asking questions during the presentation, would you prefer if they hold off until the end, or do you want to answer as you go?
For the most part, probably I'd say wait till we get to the end. Just because it may get caught later on.
Okay.
And Chris, I did send you an email a little while ago. I don't know if it's something you want to mention there. Campbell wrote me and said that
Yeah.
the sponsor of the grandfather firm bill is looking for letters from grandfathered firms who are in support of the bill passage. So Campbell's going to get
Yeah.
me a draft tomorrow. I can share, but I didn't know if
Yeah.
there's other people there that might be interested in participating.
I think it's worth bringing up.
Okay.
Just, put it out there.
Okay.
Say, what do you want to say? Get in touch with you're going to be traveling, so what do you want to do here?
If they can let you know and I'll share things with you, and if you could sort of help me
Yeah.
out, or if you could coordinate and get me names, I could do an email blast once I have the names.
I will coordinate
Okay.
and we'll work through that part.
Okay. I don't mind doing as much as I can, but I'm going to be a bit out of pocket, so I don't want to be the delay in some of this.
Right.
We
Well,
can,
in your, I mean, yeah. Okay. We can
yeah,
easily do email blasts. I mean, if it came down to it, I'd rather not, but I'm fully capable with wild apricot and email and all that shit. It's not my place.
yeah.
But
I guess my concern with doing it that way is
oh yeah.
if we do email blast, if people are opposed to it, do they send a letter and opposing it at that point?
Oh no, I meant we would send the sample letter only to those who expressed interest.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
what I meant.
Yeah, we could do that definitely through Wild Apricot, or I don't mind sending it through my email address if that's easier too.
But you're working tomorrow.
I am until about noon. I'm
Okay.
heading to the airport at noon tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to take off early for the holiday. But we'll see
Okay.
how
Good
that
luck with that.
works.
And now that goes. So are you fully remote today, or is it partially
Ooh,
remote, partially in person?
this presentation, you're muted.
I said, are you all remote for this, or is it a mix?
No, we're all remote.
Okay.
we're all remote for sure.
All right. I wasn't sure if it was a dinner meeting or all remote, so it's good. At least I can handle it that way.
No, we haven't gotten to broadcasting the dinner meetings yet. And frankly, with with Zoom, it gives us an accounting of everybody, and it's easy to audit their presence and continued presence for credit.
Sure.
It drops anything that goes in the chat gets dropped into a local text file.
Yep.
And then you can run a report, so we can see who was there and the length of time they were present.
Okay. Who paid attention and so on and so forth. By
Exactly.
response. So I don't know if you sat, yeah, you monitor, you were the moderator when I did this one before. So there's 3 assessment and learning questions that are scattered in between, but then there's the standard of care section that there are, up to 9 questions that I can cover, and depending on where we at, I can skip some depending on time.
Yeah. Well, Regina, as president, has a few introductory slides. There's one slide in there. I'm going to just make an announcement for the upcoming geology days activities, and I can mention the grandfather bill issue, and then
Okay.
we'll turn it over to you, and then usually Jennifer moderates questions and raised hands and questions in the chat.
Okay.
We have this. This is a well-oiled machine.
That works. That works. So do you normally make everybody have their cameras on too? Is that how you are handling it down there? I have not had a chance to participate before.
We have done that, yeah.
Okay.
Not today,
I mean,
though.
this-
I'm in
Not,
my
yeah, I was gonna,
pajamas.
it's the ethics one. We got to hope everybody's actually paying attention to the ethics talk.
Well, feel free to stop and say, can everybody recognize me in the chat anywhere along the way if you want,
Sure.
I turned my camera on just because of that request.
Oh, I wasn't making a request, Regina. It's all good. I just didn't know how you all handled it. So
All right, I'm turning my video off then.
Well, we've got a few minutes here.
I was gonna say when we're done, I have to finish packing. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm hoping the travel goes okay.
It's a long flight.
It is, and I went through DC a couple weeks ago and did not have the best of experience with the disability services, and
Uh-huh.
kind of got stuck. So I'm just hoping with the international flight, it's quite a distance I have to get from one gate to the other. So I'm hoping it's a little more attentive tomorrow, but we'll see. See how fast I can move.
Yeah, some of those airports are so large, like Atlanta, where my wife, with her bad ankle, just gave up on trying to walk all those distances and just request a ride at this
Yeah.
point. Just
Yeah. It just,
easier.
yeah, because why get to your final destination and be uncomfortable? Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm slow and I struggle in crowds with things and can't navigate too well in crowds. So I face the fact and ask for help. You know how that goes.
It's all good.
Yeah. It beats the alternative.
Yeah.
Always could have been worse. Get that.
What do we got here? I think we had 64 registrants, including all of us. We're up to 18 participants. It's 2 minutes of.
Okay.
Hmm.
I mean, if you want to give it a few minutes past, I'm fine with that. That's up to you.
Well, the slides that Regina has will probably run about 10 minutes, so
Okay.
that gives people, an opportunity for people to join and not miss the content.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably start here in about, 2 or 3 minutes just to try to keep on time.
No worries.
Well, I'll say this much before I shut my yammer. We really appreciate you doing this. This is very, very, very important. And I've seen this presentation before. It's a good one for anybody who on here already that hasn't heard it. So
I appreciate that, Chris. I
Yeah,
appreciate that. I'm hoping maybe over the next year or so I can make it down and do one in person. It's been a few years since I've gotten down there to do one in person.
we would love that.
It would be great to do. So I'll yeah. We do the one whatever the one's going to end up being for geology days this year. Maybe we can schedule next spring. I'll come down and do it in person for you.
You always have a seat at our table.
I appreciate it.
Mm.
See Mr. Garfield join us.
I couldn't help myself.
All right. Good to see you tonight.
Likewise.
All right. You are now
Okay.
being recorded.
We are being recorded. Hi, all. Thanks for coming. Thank you, John, for being on this webinar with us. We're excited to have you. Just before we kick off, I'd like to say that if you need PDHs, you do need to stay on this call for the entire time. There will be a quiz at the end. Please hold your questions for the end of the webinar, although you can put them in chat. Jen Lewis is going to field those questions as she usually does. And then before we get off to John's presentation, I just want to go through some of our just basic slides. Again, welcome everybody here. We do appreciate you. If you need PDHs, you have checked off that requirement. If you did not and you did not pay, just give us a little chat or an email. Raise your hand, whatever you need to do. We'll make sure that we get you covered. They are $10 for everybody here that needs PDHs. So just a big thank you for all our corporate sponsors. We are running out of room on this page, which is pretty awesome. So thank you again. We have a couple of new ones, which is great. So again, thank you very much. If you have questions about becoming a sponsor, just let me know or Chris or one of the other board members know, we'll be happy to reach out to you. If we don't get back to you right away, we are a voluntary organization, so we will. It just might take a few days, so I do apologize for that. But we will definitely get back to you if you have any questions. So here is the list of our board members, LIAPG. We do have our monthly meetings the first Wednesdays of every month. Our next meeting is May 7th. And we do offer in-person and online for that meeting. So if you do want to join, everybody is welcome to join. If you do want to join, just let us know. We can send you the agenda. You can either come into, we usually have it at the PWGC office. So if you do want to attend it in person, just let us know. If you do want to just attend it online, we will send you the Zoom link for that. So just let us know. Some upcoming events. Again, we do have our meetings the first Wednesday of every month. We do usually hold these webinars or in-person dinners on the third Thursday of each month. We did have our last in-person event in March, so we do those quarterly. So the next one should be in June. And just scrolling down on this agenda, we do have the June in-person event. It's going to be a little bit different this year than what our normal dinner event is, because it's going to be a full day event. There are 4 speakers from the DEC. We are still hashing out the details and where that venue will be, but please keep that in mind. And I think we'll be sending out an invitation for that soon. Also, we have the May 3rd Bronx Botanical Gardens trip that does have PDHs. So if you haven't signed up for that and you would like to, please do so. I think there are 2 PDHs for that. And then there is the July 19th Ducks game, which is free for all LAAPG members, plus up to 3 guests. I think there are still 16 spots remaining. So if you would like to attend, please sign up for that. And then we are always looking for speakers for in-person and virtual events. I think we're pretty well booked for the rest of the year until September. So if anybody would like to speak, or know somebody that wants to speak, please let us know and we will put you on the agenda. And then we have our Museum of Natural History, Hall of Planet Earth pending. Hopefully date to be determined, but it might be I think in August, maybe the first week. So just keep that in your books if you would like to attend that. If anybody didn't see, we did release the newsletter for April 2025. I did release a note with it that said it was the first newsletter. It is not the first newsletter. Somebody pointed that out. Thank you very much. It is the first newsletter, I think, in a while. So I did want to just address that. But if you haven't got a chance to read that, you can go online. We do have a news up at the top of our bar. We do have like a news option. You can click on that and drag it down and you'll see the newsletter for that. So if you do have content for that you'd like to share for any of the upcoming ones, we're going to try to do this quarterly. We are so appreciative and would love to have any of that content. Thank you so much. And then some of the other organizations, we always like to support our sister organizations. This is just a list. And then another update on just some upcoming events. I don't know, Chris, if you want to share about this. Usually Chris does the CPG update.
Sure. Thanks, Regina. Couple of just one housekeeping item. there's a number of people logged in that are either just have their initials or their first name. And it would be appreciated for auditing purposes if everybody could use the chat and just acknowledge your presence with a full first and last name. That would be very helpful to us. But as far as the council update goes, we're just going to focus on some upcoming events. And a similar presentation to what's being given tonight is going to be given by the council on a webinar, and it is on May 7th. It's our second quarterly lunchtime webinar at noon. And the speaker is going to be Eric Greppo from the New York State Education Department, and he's going to be doing an ethics presentation. So if that's something that interests you, or you know somebody that couldn't make this one and is seeking that required credit for PDH, turn them on to this. You can find more information on the CPG website. On May 8th, we have the Geology Rocks 2025 event in White Plains. And the band this year is called Mr. Breakdown, and it's new funk music. For anybody who's not been there, this is a fantastic venue. It's got an open bar. The food's good. You know, the music has always been really good, and we still have tickets available. So again, CPG website, if you're interested. It's going to be a good time. I believe there is a shuttle going from Long Island, and I think there may be one from upstate. I'm not sure, but we can check on that. On the 14th of May, there is another presentation that Eric Repo from SED is doing, and it is for folks who want to prepare their licensure application. There's some good coaching and pointers there, because ultimately what you're doing here is you're preparing to take the ASBOG exams, and that's going to be a good one. And then we have, of course, Geology Days coming up in November. We had a due date for abstracts of April 11th with notification on acceptance by the 16th, but we still have some openings. I think we're shy about 10 abstracts, so you're not too late. If you were thinking about it, now's the time to pull the trigger and jump in, because you know, this event's been just growing in the quality and the quantity of what we're doing. So think about it. Please do. One more item, and that is just if you work for a firm that is a grandfathered engineering firm in New York State, and you've been challenged with the issue of not being able to obtain a certificate of authority to practice professional geology in the state. Many people probably heard about this, but there is a bill that has been in years past never seems to make it to the governor's desk. What we found this year is that it was passed the Senate unopposed. It's in the Assembly, and it's got a lot more momentum with it. But one of the things that our lobbyist, Campbell Wallace, has been doing is meeting with a lot of legislative folks, and they feel that if some letters of support could come from companies that are affected by this situation, that would be really, really helpful in getting it over the finish line and getting it to Governor Hochul's desk this year. So if you're in that situation, we will have a template drafted that could be used for that purpose to support this effort, which is, you know, we're really working hard to get this to be resolved. So you can reach out to our feature speaker tonight, John Nadeau, or you can reach out to me, and we can connect you with the right information, and you know, hopefully we can get some support here. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Regina.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for also taking care of that housekeeping item. Again, if you haven't put your name in the chat, please put it in. If you need a PDH credit, please make sure that you've paid. If you still need to pay, let us know. You definitely need to be here for the entire time and answer the questions at the end of the presentation to qualify for those PDHs. And if you have any questions, let me know. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John. Thank you so much for being here. So take it away.
All right. Thank you, Regina, and thank you, Chris. I'll just throw in real quick in regards to the May 7th presentation by Eric Repo. The the initial presentations in November at Geology Days, these two talks, his talk that he's doing on the 7th of May and my talk I'm giving you tonight, were essentially you know, run in conjunction with itself. His part of the talk really got into the regulatory aspect and some of the nitty gritty, and my take on a lot of the information he's going to provide is really the common sense, what you're going to use on a day-to-day basis that someone sitting from in his desk can't really say, where us in the field can talk about a little more openly. So with that, again, it's the Common Sense Guide to Business Practices in New York. When Chris asked me to do this, he told me to try and keep it under 3 hours. So that's my goal for the evening. So we're going to really break it down into 3 parts. The first part really gets into some of the basics. I keep saying I'm hoping most people have a good grasp of this, but every talk that we have, this section does bring some questions. So I do continue to cover some of it. I'll go through it a little on the quick side, but if you have questions about it, throw it in the chat and I'll address them in more depth at the end. And then we sort of talk a little bit more about the business entities and the ins and outs of maintaining your business. And then we get into a little bit with the standard of care. And the way the talk's going to be broken down, I'm going to do a couple of the assessment or learning questions in the beginning. And then the standard of care section really is going to be an interactive part where you can answer the questions. We'll kind of gauge everybody. It's a little more difficult with the text in the chat, but we'll try and just sort of gauge how everybody's feeling. Some of these things go, and we'll go through as many of those as we can, given the system we're using tonight, and try and get done in a timely fashion under that 3-hour timeline. So to start off with the licensing and the corporations, for anybody that is not fully understanding or just needs the refresher, any firm offering geologic services must possess a certificate of authorization, the C of A, in geology. Sole proprietors do not need to have a C of A. You can, and I'll talk a little bit more on that as we go on, but that is the only people. Single owners do not need to have one, because you're essentially just selling your own self work-wise. Geologic licensure does not restrict engineering practice. When the law was signed in 2014, there was language put in that engineers can essentially mirror the work of a geologist as long as it is called engineering. And given civil engineering, geotechnical engineering, there is such an overlap that the wording of the law allows those folks to continue to do the work that they do as long as it's called engineering. And professional geologists, since 2016, can enter partnerships with the other design professions, the engineers, land surveyors, design architects. Engineering or land surveying firms wishing to offer geologic services need to add a professional geologist as an owner and or a director, depending on the structure, and then amend the certificate of authorization to include each licensed profession involved. You go from Joe Schmo Engineering to Joe Schmo Engineering and Geology. Permissible business entities. As I said, to start off, sole proprietors may elect to obtain the certificate of authorization. This gives you a little bit more of a legal corporate protection, but you do not need to do it as a sole proprietor. All these authorized entities require the C of A, what's called a professional and design service corporations, the PC and the DPC, the professional limited liability companies, the PLLC, the partnerships, the LLP, professional partnerships, and of course, any joint venture enterprises, the JVs. So talking a little bit about how these businesses can be structured, a PLLC, the PC, or the LLP all must have 100% ownership by a licensed professional. And in the realm of the design professions, they all have to be design professionals to form these companies. You can't get a medical professional, you can't have a lawyer. They all have to be design professions. And then you have in 2012 what was called the Design Professional Corporation, the DPC, which can only be formed by domestic corporations. No out-of-state corporations can come into New York and form a DPC unless they form a New York-based entity. And within these organizations, 75% of the ownership has to be professionals. So if you want to give junior staff who are working towards getting their licensure stock as incentives, you can give folks like that up to 25% ownership in the company with a DPC structure. And the same, 75% of directors and officers have to be licensed professionals as well. And then there's the ESOPs, which is the employee-owned corporations can have up to 100% ESOP ownership with certain qualifications as a DPC. And for more information about that, I do have the website on state eds that provides more introduction to the corporate structures. And this is the point in time where I pause and say I'm not neither a legal or a CPA professional. I recommend anytime anybody is switching, looking to convert, set up a new company, always check with both your legal representation, your CPA accountant, to make sure whatever structure you have chosen fits your designation and that you are going to be set properly for what you want to do. Don't take my word for that. I can give you some brief suggestion. Take that and run. Again, the foreign corporations, these are all out-of-state corporations. So a company formed in New Jersey that wants to come in is considered a foreign corporation, but also a Canadian company, European company. Anything that is not based in New York State is considered a foreign corporation. And these all must be recognized and organized in home jurisdiction as the professional entity. So somebody that is based out of, say, Connecticut, New Jersey, comes into New York and wants to open a subsidiary in New York has to be set up in their home jurisdiction as that professional corporation. And in the same process, must meet the standards of a New York corporation and must have all of your owners licensed in the home jurisdiction and at least one in New York. So not everybody in the company would have to be licensed in New York at that point in time, but at least one would have to be. And then the general business corporations, how your inks that most geologic firms used to be pre-law signing, except where specifically authorized by law, a general business corporation may not at this point in time provide professional services to the public, exercise any judgment over the delivery of professional services, have employees who offer professional services to the public, hold itself out as offering professional services, or share profits and split fees with licensed professionals. So you can't have, the drilling company, a contractor, things like that come in and share in the profits with the licensed professionals. They either have to be, they would have to be a sub, or your general business corporation can't hire a licensed professional to work under them. And the only way really that an Inc. can appear in New York State offering professional services if it is an out-of-state, a foreign corporation that may be formed as an Inc. in the state that they are, can still use that name within New York as long as they meet all the other structural changes. So that's usually the only place you're going to see an Inc. So when it comes to maintaining your business, there are a few things you have to do on a regular basis. Similar to the individual licensure, there is the triennial renewal of that certificate of authorization. The corporations must notify both the Education Department and New York State Department of State of any change in board structure. If you have a new president, you bring new people onto the board, all of those things have to be made known to both the Education Department and Department of State. And from what I've been told, it is within 30 days of those changes to those things. A lot of times it doesn't get caught until the triennial review, but it is one of those things that they do say you are supposed to do on a regular basis. And I bring up a little bit on the individual side. This goes to the same with your individual license. If you get married, you get divorced, name change, you change your address, you are supposed to notify the Education Department within 30 days of any sort of change to your individual license and your corporate license. And the business must comply with corporate practice laws, and you must maintain the licensed professional owners have to keep their active registrations. If somebody within the company decides that they don't want to renew, find themselves in some sort of trouble, didn't get enough continuing education credits, gets their license suspended, other things that end up having their license restricted, adversely affects the business as a whole. So be careful with that. What does all this mean to you as an individual professional geologist? And you can only advertise the PG for firms with the certificate of authorization in geology. So if you work for a firm that does not have the C of A in geology and you have your PG, my recommendation is do not put that in your signature on your emails, on your business cards, all of those things. You as an individual can have your PG, but you working for a firm that doesn't have that C of A, you should not be holding yourself out as that, because both the company and you as the individual can be held accountable for that. So always be careful of that, and make sure you're following those rules. There is no industrial exemption for geology. In engineering, there is the industrial exemption. You go to many companies, I use like IBM, used to have engineers that would work for them, could do all of the document signings and things like that. The geology licensure does not allow industrial companies to hire their own people in-house. They have to go to third-party professional geologist companies to sign documents, prepare reports and things that would go to the public, the state, representing those companies. You can work for industry or engineering firms, including grandfathered engineering firms, but cannot use your PG designation, as I said, and you can't sign those documents as a PG. So it can be considered your personal thing, but when you work for the company that does not have that C of A, make sure you protect yourself and don't hold yourself out for that within the company. And if you're asked to sign something, you can refuse, because it is essentially a Class E felony. So again, exempt persons in relations to the professional geologist, the geologic research and or teaching conducted at a accredited educational and not-for-profit research institute conducted solely through those institutions. So anybody who's working for university, who is teaching students, doing research, can call themselves a geologist. Try not to, don't use the term professional geologist, but you are a geologist. The moment that you step outside of the university, offer services on the side, you do need to have your license and or a C of A, depending on if it's a multiple people doing it as a group. So those folks who are teaching in these universities, doing research, you're fine as long as you stay within that bubble. And one is a licensed PG required to perform geologic work. Anytime approval is needed from a government agency for a New York-based client or project that includes applying geologic principles. So if you're working out of state, you have to follow those state regulations. If you happen to work on a federal government project, if you're on the federal government lands, you're fine until you hit the fence and end up 5 feet off the property. You now have to have that New York State license. But as long as you are working within a federal site, you would be fine on that property only. When the complexity of the geologic design or setting requires the skill of a professional geologist. And then, of course, when the required services fall within the legal definition of the practice of geology. Here it gets into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of the rules and regulations. I do recommend, if you have not at any point in time taken the time to read through the regulations, they're really not that onerous, especially the education law, the 145, the sections that are referred to here in the board readings rules. They're only a few pages. And the one thing that I say is as a professional and as that licensed registered professional, you are held to these standards. So to not know what it is and then to say, well, I didn't know I couldn't do that is not going to be good in your favor. Take the time to go through and check these out. And the other thing I recommend to people on the SED website, they do have a quiz that asks questions based on these, both the law and the regulations, that when you take the quiz, you save your score at the end, and you can use that for a PDH credit as well. So if you need additional PDH credits, it's a good way to make sure you understand the different sections of both the regulations and the law. And I'll just mention really quick, the three, the education law, Article 130, the 6590 is really the definition of professional misconduct. Know what it is to make sure you're not doing it. 6512 is, defines the unauthorized practice and details that, how that is considered a crime. And then the unauthorized use of a title, at this point in time, the professional geologist is a legally protected title, and unauthorized use of that is considered a crime. And like I said, it is considered a Class E felony. So, and then, the 145, the education law, really defines the design professions. So unprofessional conduct. We've talked a lot of how to be professional. Now we sort of hit what is considered unprofessional by the rules of the Board of Regents. Quid pro quo. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. You send me clients, I'll send you clients. Be careful with that. It's good to say here's somebody I use all the time, but don't do it because somebody then makes sure you get a percentage, of a job, you get kickback, anything like that. Avoid that because it is considered unprofessional conduct. Exchanging referrals without that clear disclosure, and then offering products, services, favors, or trade for accelerating process or job delivery. Just be careful. You can always say, hey, there's, you can charge somebody extra and be clear in your disclosure of it. If, there's a 50% markup for, moving someone to the front of the line, as long as you do that to everybody, That's not unprofessional conduct. But making sure you disclose everything, and you're not trading favors behind the scenes to move people along. Practicing fraudulently, incompetence, negligence, or practicing without the license, fee splitting, profit sharing when authorized entities, practicing beyond the scope or improper delegation, and false or misleading advertising. Practice beyond your scope or improper delegation, within, the canon of ethics. If you are a geophysicist and 99% of your work is geophysics, and someone comes along and goes, I need hydrogeology. If it is not something you normally do, if it is not something you normally would consider something that you could consider your realm of expertise, you then should not be offering that scope. If you do geology as a whole and can do that, that's fine. It's sort of like the electrical engineer holding himself out to be an aerospace engineer. You don't go beyond your scope of practice. And in false or misleading advertising, you don't hold yourself out as the best geologist, or you just don't make claims that say how better you are, or promising to get a site cleaned, or things like that. If you cannot prove that it can be done, don't advertise you can do it. And honesty is always the best ethical principle of geology or life, depending how you look at it. And this applies to proposals, reports, technical support for legal actions. The science is what it is. Your interpretations may vary from somebody else's, but be honest with what you see. Don't have somebody tell you, well, we want to see X, so make sure that it comes out as X. That is not being honest. You must not exaggerate your advertising, such as the guaranteeing results or your claims of superiority. You may not misrepresent your competency or experience. If you got 5 years experience, don't tell people you got 15. And disclose professional conflicts. If you are working for a client on a project and someone comes along and asks you to do something else for the same project, you have to disclose that you're working for somebody on that project already. Within your corporation requirements, you must maintain all of your records for a minimum of 6 years. I have people who tell me they keep every single piece of paper for 30 years of practice. Early on, when I talked to people at the education department, they did say, well, we recommend the 6 years, and people after that start to pare things down. And the reasoning that was always given to me was, if you have the documents in your files, you can be held accountable for anything that's in those files. So if after 6 years you keep your written reports, you keep the things that you can easily review, have the knowledge to be able to speak to, and not every single email, not every single note, that could come back and make it difficult for you to defend yourself on the stand. But if you're comfortable doing that, but you have to maintain those records for the minimum of 6 years. What happens after that, you're free to do whatever you want to do. And disclose the conflicts of interest to all parties. Within that, the way I describe this to people, if you have 3 people come to you for the same job and want to partner, want to have you be a sub to help them with a project, as long as you use the same hourly rates, the same dollars to dollars. If party A wants you to do 5 times the amount of work, you quote them using the same amount. It may be a bigger pie at the end of at the end of the project, but your numbers were the same, and you can let them know that multiple people have asked you to partner with them, and at least have all of the parties know that you have submitted proposals to others, and it doesn't come back on you at that point. And this is one that I get a lot of questions on. So I'm going to. This is the education department saying you may not charge percentage markups of subcontractors. Instead, you should be charging for time to manage the subcontractors. This becomes an issue, and when we did this in November, when I've done this subsequently, this is usually the biggest question generator part of the entire discussion, the presentation. And two things I will say on this is I have discussed it with the education department after the last couple of presentations. They are working to come out with a guidance document for the field, and my understanding, from what I've been told, is this applies to engineering firms. It applies to land surveyors, everything within the design professions. And not everybody's been doing it over the years, so they are trying to clean it up. But they are starting to hold feet to the fire on this, so do be careful. And the other question, concern that people have had with this is when you start running the subcontractors through, it does affect your bottom line of the company. And when you go get your insurance, it may inflate what your insurance may be. And people use that percentage markup to essentially cover part of the insurance. You just have to sort of figure that into a management fee for what you're doing, and charge that via time, or have a fixed line item on there that details that, but it can't be a percentage markup for those things. So sealing of documents, documents that require seals of signature, your geologic drawings, calculations, and specifications, investigations or reports containing technical information, findings, or geologic directions, and forms required by government or regulatory authorities that require a seal. And only sign and seal documents that your company maintains a C of A for, that you are personally qualified for based on your education and your experience, and you have been responsible for the product directly or have directly supervised the staff involved in the work preparation. If somebody else in your company does all the work and you just happen to have the stamp and they come up and say, you got to sign this, if you don't have a full working knowledge of it, do not put your signature on that unless you're comfortable with the work product that's there. So with that, I'm going to hit the first assessment of learning question. We're going to do the two that we have here, and then we'll start getting into a little bit more of the other sections of the talk. So the first question is, may a licensed and registered professional geologist employed by industrial company sign regulatory documents on behalf of the company? Yes, a PG may practice geology for the employer, A. B, no, a PG may not practice geology within a general business corporation. Or C, yes, since the PG is not practicing geology to the public. So it can give everybody a minute to answer that.
Is there supposed to be a pop-up for this or something? Or do we do it through the chat? How do we do this?
You can do it right in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
So you can answer that question. Does it look like we have most of the answers in?
It looks like it's overwhelmingly B.
That is correct. It is B. Good job. And then the assessment of learning number 2, can companies not authorized to practice geology in New York employ PGs? A, yes, but the company cannot offer the geologic services. or B, know a company that must have a certificate of authorization to employ geologists. So please answer A or B. And while you're doing that, I'll just start talking on the other section, and then once we have a fair number of those, we'll confirm the answer.
We've
So-
got a
so-
lot of A's, some B's.
Okay, so let me just go back to that real quick, and so with this, the answer is A. Yes, the company, you can work for a company, you just cannot hold yourself out as a PG. And so, look at engineering firms. You can work for them. You could work for a lab. You could work for these places. As long as you don't call yourself a PG, you can work for those companies. So it is in fact A. So tort law and the professional. Tort law really addresses the civil wrongs considered torts that may cause harm to a person and result in the legal liability for the person who committed the act. And really the goal of the tort law is to compensate the victim for their losses and provide relief for the wrongful act. So it's really making sure to make a victim whole without significant punishment to the person who may have made a mistake. How does tort law apply to professional geologists? And this really gets down to liability to third parties. A geologist can be held liable to third parties, the owners of properties, for any negligence that results in danger to health or safety. You're working on a dam project, you give some recommendations, and then the dam fails. You could be held liable to help either repair the damage to the dam, or be held liable for anything downstream that may have been damaged. And this transfers the cost of the damage to the party who really had the ability and the training and education, who could best avoid the situation from happening. Doesn't mean things aren't going to happen. This is why people carry insurance, and when things do unfortunately happen, you are protected. And written contracts should include description of the work, your schedule, and your payments terms. Always try to put as much information into your contracts to protect yourself, but also protect the client from the work being done. And really, just getting a brief introduction to the tort, negligent law. And again, it's really the body of the law exists to right wrongs caused by failure to take reasonable precautions. And it speaks to careless but not reckless or intentional acts. It really breaks down to four different parts. It's the duty of care, the breach, which is the violation of the duty of care, causation, what is the proximate and actual causes, and then of course what damages, what harm was caused. In one of the ways that kind of look at this and is easily described that Campbell has used when he's joined me on these is, let's take navigational situations. You've got a barge, the barge is tied up to a dock. Your duty as the barge owner is to make sure that that barge is secured. And say you're told another hurricane's coming through. You have to, is your barge tied up with twine, or is it tied up with large chains, and made sure that every potential way that you can hold that there is there, or is it one rope and good luck and God bless? So you must exercise the ordinary skill and competence of the member of your profession. In breach, did you unreasonably fail to uphold that duty of care? You just didn't feel like going down to the dock and making sure the boat's tied up, knowing a hurricane's coming. you're too busy watching the ball game, the Yankees and Mets are playing and nobody wants to go down to the dock and check on things. You did not reasonably uphold your duty to make sure you did it. And then what happens, the causation, what's the breach of the duty? What causes the claimant loss? Did your barge run into another barge, cause it to sink, and then all of the items on that barge were lost? Did your barge run into a bridge and cause the bridge to collapse? And then the damages, what is the actual loss to the claimant? Do you owe the person who owns the barge? Do you then own anything that was on the barge? You may be held responsible to pay for those losses. But say it's a bunch of steel and somebody was gonna build something with that steel and they no longer have it. Well, can they sue you? And then was somebody going to buy the stuff that was purchased? At some point in time, the loss is no longer your responsibility. But there's the chain of events of where does your damages and where does your causation lead? Or is your barge, or is it a tugboat? Is it a kayak, and your kayak gets loose and goes down and scratches the bridge versus completely destroying the bridge? A can of paint versus replacement of the bridge. What are the damages and what's the overall loss? And then, getting into standard of care, the duty of care is found, within common law, and it's not really statute. So, and here's two examples that are in engineer law in different places. To prove malpractice, an owner must present expert evidence to show the standard of care by which a design professional's competence must be judged, and also that the design professional, architect, engineer, geologist, did something or failed to do something that violates the accepted standard of practice or standard of care. And the other way to look at this is the law has traditionally required, not perfect results, but rather the exercise of the skill and judgment that can be reasonably expected from similarly situated professionals. So in a brief essence, the standard of care is really what the group is doing on a regular basis at this point. So what is the profession doing when it comes to remediation? Is what you are doing the same as everybody else? Are you not to the extent of what they're doing? Are you doing something that was done 20 years ago, has been proven to be outdated? Where do you fall in those categories? That is the standard of care. It is not perfection. So practicing with the skill and care that a reasonable, careful professional would use in similar circumstances, applying your knowledge, experience, and your expertise to complete a project with the degree of care that prevents injury or financially damaging events. And then the behavior usually consists of actions, but may also consist of omissions when there is some duty to act. And again, like I said, the standard of care is not perfection. In common principles within the standard of care, you've got the skill, care, and competency. Ordinary and reasonable, be wary of contract language that requires you to provide services that rise above ordinary skill and care. Again, if an owner of a property comes to you and says, here's the contract, you are going to guarantee this site's going to be perfectly clean, you are going to have this done and faster than anybody else and all that, that is not the standard of care, and you as the professional should not sign that contract, because it is holding you to a standard that is not the norm for the industry. And your skill, care, and competence is acquired through education and experience. And again, like we talked about earlier, practice only in your area of competence. And then use of evidence and knowledge form decisions. And then, similar circumstances, time, location, conditions, risks, and hazards. Does what you're doing match those for anybody else that would be doing a similar type of project? And the standard of care is fluid. It may change with future practice within the profession. So, a progression of science, technological advancement, both of those, look at how sites were cleaned up 30, 40 years ago, how things have changed, both in understanding, some of the contaminants that are now being looked at that weren't being looked at 30 years ago. All of those have changed, and with it, the standard of care for cleanups of sites has changed with it, and then any legal, case precedent. So now we get into, we have a grouping of these questions, that are really the standard of care. And this is, again, try to get an idea of looking at this and what you think would be current standard of care. So the first one, going to read the situation, and then we have a couple of questions based off of this situation. So yet you designed a slope remediation that includes a graded aggregate filter to convey groundwater seepage from beneath a highway embankment. The aggregates you specified were materials that were pre-approved for use with DOT projects. Identify whether the decisions would meet or violate the standard of care. So the first one is you specified materials that are pre-approved for use on DOT projects. Do you believe this meets the standard of care or it violates the standard of care? How are we looking, Regina?
We're looking like it's mostly A.
That
All
would that would be correct. So for this one, it would be because these were all pre-approved, then it meets the standard of care. Excuse me. So when we look at, you specified number 2, the filter aggregate gradations based on one single grain size distribution analysis that was performed on a sample that was collected during the subsurface exploration. Would basing all your work off of one analysis meet the standard, or would that violate the standard of care?
I think everybody is answering B.
All right, that is correct. We're
Mhm.
looking at B as the answer for that. And then you specified the filter aggregate gradations based on subsurface exploration boring logs that were prepared using visual and manual procedures. Does this meet the standard of care or violate the standard of care?
Right, it looks like everybody is answering A.
For this one
Oh, yeah.
is actually B.
Oh, okay. Well, there was one B in there in the answers that I just saw come through. So
All right, so one person got it right.
one
Everybody else failed.
person.
We got to start all over. Let's go back to square one.
They did.
So this is really because you aren't using your technology. You're not doing labs. This is all done off the visual or manual. So to make all of your decisions when the standard of care would be to have the grain size sent to a lab for analysis. That would kind of put you while you're looking at that. So number 4, big project but small geologic task. Is it okay to be subcontracted by a PG? I'm sorry, by a PE or a general contractor? So A, it's okay for professionals to be subcontracted by a PE but not a general contractor. It is okay to be subcontracted by both for a small project. It is only okay to be subcontracted by a PE if the company possesses a C of A in geology. And D, you cannot be subcontracted by either.
All right, we got a couple of answers rolling in. It looks like most people are answering C.
That is correct. We're looking at C. As long as the company has the C of A in geology, They can subcontract you if either, it's for a specialty, or, they just don't have enough help to do a field project, and they need some help with things like that. They could do it as long as the company that is doing so, has enough of a knowledge base to be able to review, understand, and be able to sign off on any work that was done. So just throws a couple of caveats out there. Then we have a property owner wants to engage both the PE and a PG within their separate expertise in the same project. If the owner insists on executing one single contract for both services, how may the PE and PG structure the contract? We can allow the professional who received the original call to be the prime and the other is the sub. B, the professional with the largest percentage of work should be the prime. Or C, the two professionals should insist on a three-way contract that specifies the work scopes and costs described separately for each service.
Okay, we got some answers coming in. It looks like the majority is C.
All right, perfect. We're cooking right along here.
You got it.
And then after excavating to prepare the subgrade, the contractor's independent transportation engineer reports the specified aggregate gradations will not prevent soil particle movement. Identify which of the following decisions would meet or violate the standard of care. You visit the site to make visual observations of the prepared subgrade, and you decide that the independent engineer's concern appear valid. A meets the standards, or B violates the standards.
And it looks like there's a mix, B and A.
All right, this one would be A, because it is, you're using your expertise to collaborate the concerns, and then you could do more work to validate that. Number 7, you recommend taking additional samples and performing grain size distribution analysis to check the adequacy of the specifications. Does this meet the standard or violate the standard of care? So this would be, say, step 2 of the process.
Looks like we're getting a lot of A's.
Perfect. That is correct.
Excellent.
You accept the independent engineer's opinion and you allow the contractor to place the material that they prefer. So you don't bother to follow up or check anything. You take his word and run for the door. Is that meeting the standard or violating the standard?
Looks like most people think it's B, violates the standard.
That's correct. All right. So the last one of these is your approach by 3 separate engineering firms to participate in a joint venture project. Each one asks for a slightly different scope. Is this ethical? A, no, you cannot bid with more than one partner. B, you are free to participate as you wish. Or C, yes, as long as you provide the same resume and hourly rates for each proposal.
So it looks like mostly everybody, if not everybody, has answered C.
Perfect. Everybody paid attention. That is a good thing. So we're looking at the summary. We're wrapping things up and we'll open up to questions. The PG licensure provides permission to practice in New York State within the regulated scope of practice and the professional's competency. The PG licensure indicates to the public that the professional meets the minimum New York State criteria for education, experience, and examination. And the practitioners must be aware of the standard of care. And the laws and regulations do not define the standard of care. And I'll just throw in again that standard of care can change over time. And I just sort of answered that question, but we'll ask it anyways. The standard of care will not change in the future, true or false? And I'm hoping everybody answers that one correctly after the last slide.
We've got a lot of B's, false.
That is correct. So with that, I'll wrap it up. We'll take some questions. I don't know how best you handle that. Just anything in
If
the chat.
anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask them, or place them in the chat and I will read them out loud.
John, I had a comment. I've obviously seen this presentation before, but I thought it was interesting. There was the one assessment question related to standard of care, and almost everyone, other than maybe one person, got it wrong. And I don't think this is intentional, but it drives home the importance of your expertise. Because we're PGs doesn't mean we're an expert in all the different tasks that fall under the law of what defined as geology. And that question showed that, because what we thought would be standard of care for someone that doesn't specialize in exactly what that question was wouldn't know what the current proper ways are to inspect that material to do the right thing. So I just thought that was interesting, just a comment that it really drives home the importance of practicing within your field of expertise and not thinking that you can do the entire breadth of what the legal definition of geology is by the state of New York.
And you're correct, Rob. And I would say for every one of these we've done, one or two of these questions tend to snag a good chunk of the audience, and it varies between each group. So it is interesting to see that. And and some of these are set up that way to lead you one direction and just see how the group thinks along the lines.
Yep.
So any other questions?
We have a question from Michael McCain. Sub markups are not allowed, but can a PG charge a penalty for overdue payments from a client?
I believe that sort of gets into a different, you're not marking something up. So if you charge somebody a late fee for payment, that's outside of that marking up somebody else's services. So I have not heard anything from the education department that would say you can't do that. I think that's just more of a straight business question. But I can confirm that and address that in a future thing. Other questions?
Doesn't look like there's any other questions. I guess with that, John, thank you so much.
Thank you, Regina. Thanks, Chris, for hosting, and everybody for joining this evening.
And make sure, everybody, that you have your name in the chat the way that you would like us to be able to identify you for your PDHs if you need that. And if everybody is enjoying their vacation, please have a nice vacation. If you're taking off next week, have a nice vacation. And if you're not, have a good work week. Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Have a great day tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Yeah, everybody go
Bye.
back to work and enjoy your work.